Okay guys, thanks for tuning in. Nerdy-Nawg-Dawg Productions. This is video 2 for chapter 7 and 8. And again, this was the chapter 7. We use this as a quiz rather than a test. But where most of you went wrong were on these problems I'd like to review now. And again, they do show up in that way on the chapter 8 test. So, first, this number 4 asks, what is 2 and 1/50th expressed as a decimal? Well, we know off the bat that this 2 can be represented as a whole number, right? So either way, we know that 2 is going to be on the left side of the decimal. Now let's deal with that 1/50th. Okay, so we've got the 1/50th. And if we're thinking of my great big place value cheat sheet up on the wall, is there such thing as a 50th? No, put on your lisp, because we need to think in terms of tenths and 100ths. So will 50 go into tenths? No. Will 50 go into 100ths? Yes, it will. So we know that in order to easily make that into a decimal, we need to think in terms of hundredths. Okay? So what does it take for 50 to go to 100? We had to multiply by 2. So what do we need to do at the top? Now, this is just equivalent fractions, review from last chapter. We have to multiply this by 2. So 2 times 1. Now I have 2 hundredths. How do I write that? Well, guys, it's all in the name. Do not forget. How do we read this as a fraction? 2 hundredths. This is its last name. That's its first name. That should tell you what place column it is on. Use my cheat sheet on the board. And again, we know that this is the tenths house. This is the hundredths house. So if its last name is hundredths, we've got to get it to this column. Okay? So we know it's 2 hundredths. I can put my 2 there. What do I put here? Well, I need a place filler, so I can put a 0 there. So this fraction 2 and 1/50th, as a decimal, can be written as 2 and 2 hundredths. So the correct answer for that would have been A. This number right below it, number 5, a lot of you missed that too. So let's talk about that. It says express 4 hundredths as a fraction. How do we do that? Well, of course, we know how to read this when we put it on the cheat sheet on the wall, which you can definitely use for the test. So if I know how to read it, I know how to write it. 4 hundredths is the same as writing 4 last name hundredths, right? So then it says in simplest form. That means I need to reduce it and find the answer that best matches. Well, I know that 100 is a multiple of 4. So I can easily divide both of these by 4, right? 4 goes into 4 one time. 4 goes into 100 25 times. Oh, and then look right below it. That was a possibility. Another question I did really want to drive home, and I hope that you guys are getting. If you can read it, I promise you can write it. So it says, write 576 hundredths in decimal form. Well, I can do that. So if we can read it, I can write it. I know that I can write it as a fraction. 576 hundredths. That's its last name, right? And then all I have to do, I already know it's in the hundredths house. I could do this one of 2 ways, because I see I've got an improper fraction, right? Larger quantity as the numerator above a smaller denominator. So that means, how many times will 100 fit into 500? Well, Mrs. Nawg-Dave, 100 fits in 500 5 times. And then that's my whole number, but I'm going to have something left over, right? As a fraction, this would then turn to 76 hundredths, 5 and 76 hundredths, which I also know I could write as 5 as my whole number, And if I use my cheat sheet on the wall, this being the 10th house, this is the 100th house, then that 76, I need to have that last digit end up in the 100th house. So 576 hundredths in decimal form is the same as 5 and 76 hundredths. If you can read it, I promise you, you can write it.